Welcome back, future geniuses. Today we're going to talk about the last half of the rise of the dictators. So if you remember from our last video, we talked about Adolf Hitler and his rise, and we've talked about Mussolini and his desire to recreate the Holy Roman Empire of Caesar and the good old days of Italy. And so today we're going to talk about what's going on in Japan at the same time, what's going on in Russia, and actually what's going on in the United States. Because while we don't elect a dictator or a brute, we do elect this guy right here, who's going to be elected president 4 times, the most of any president. And after his presidency, they're actually going to change the rules so that you can't be elected more than twice, keeping that precedent that was set by this guy right here, as a matter of fact, George Washington. So today you should add this to your notebook, and this should be The Rise of the Dictators Part 2. If you have any questions, make sure you add those to your notes, and let's go. So, Rise of the Dictators, again, just a little bit of a rehash here. We have Joseph Stalin on your left, Hitler in the middle with Mussolini next to him, and then there's 2 people we're actually going to talk about when we talk about Japan. One is Emperor Hirohito, and the other one is General Tojo, who's going to be the military leader of Japan. But first we'll talk about Japan. So just like in Germany and Italy and most of the world, the Depression hits Japan really hard, and the people become really frustrated with the failure to solve the economic problems. Just like how in Germany, they're going after the Weimar Republic for the failures of the government to like fend off this depression. Japan is also going to blame its own government, and as a result, the military dictatorship, or the military rulers see an opportunity there. They see a chance to like move in and take over, and so they do. And Tojo is one of them. He moves in and kind of takes power. He's going to run the government with Emperor Hirohito, and these leaders want to expand Japan's power within Asia. They want to create their own empire, their own imperialism, and they're going to build their military, and they're going to start moving out and trying to conquer many of the same parts of Japan that we think of, or many of the same parts of Asia that we think of today. Now, in September of 1931, Japan launches an attack on Manchuria in northwest China. And the League of Nations condemns the act, but largely does nothing, much like what happens when Italy takes over parts of Ethiopia. Remember, if Ethiopia cries out for help to the League of Nations condemns the act and limits sales of weapons to Italy, but largely they do nothing. And the same thing happens here. This really starts to begin to highlight the weakness of the League of Nations to really do anything. They don't really have much teeth to be able to openly strike back against countries that are openly defying them. Now, in 1937, because of that failure to do anything, Japan sees an opening and moves in and takes over and invades northern China and begins moving south until they occupy pretty much all of China. And we're not going to go into this too deeply, but there's a really rough history between the Chinese and the Japanese because of this imperialistic desire that the Japanese have. Now, 3 years later, Japan, wanting to kind of keep their backs clean there, kind of have somebody watch out for them. They sign an alliance with Germany and Italy. This is going to form the Axis power, and it's going to be Japan, Germany, and Italy are the 3 main countries that are going to be involved in World War II against, as what will be known as the Allies, which will be the United States, the Soviet Union, the French, and the British, among other nations. But those are the big ones. Now, just like Japan is militarizing and is imperializing, the Soviet Union's doing much of the same thing. If you remember back from our earlier discussions, in World War I, Vladimir Lenin was sent back to Russia from Germany to basically cause havoc for the Russians. They kick out the Tsar, they set up a communist state, they move out of the war, and Lenin runs the country for many years. But by the late 1920s, he has passed away, and Joseph Stalin, after a long and hard-fought battle with Trotsky, ends up taking power of the communist, it becomes the communist leader of the Soviet Union. Now, Stalin executes his rivals and orders the death of thousands for not supporting him. And if you remember when we talked about a little bit about the Soviet Union in previous videos, if you remember, even his former ally, Leon Trotsky, who became kind of his enemy and vied for power, He was so paranoid about this guy that he even had him tracked down to Mexico and drove a ice pit right through the middle of his head. So he's incredibly paranoid. Actually, there's a really interesting story about Stalin. So one night he goes to the theater, right? And when he makes his appearance at the theater, the whole crowd rises. They give him a standing ovation, and this goes on and on and on. And eventually, this one guy, he ends up sitting down because this has been going on for a while. He stops clapping. He sits down. He's the first one to do it, and as a result, Stalin's guards actually kind of pick him out of the crowd, take him out back to the alley, and execute him for how dare you be the first to do that. So from then on, there would be instances of applause that would go on for like 45 minutes for Joseph Stalin. I mean, he has this real personality cult that's built around him, much like Lenin, much like many other dictators that you'll see as we talk about them over the years. But he ends up sending millions of people to work camps and in government-owned farms, and eventually he's going to kind of sign a non-aggression pact with the Germans and try to stave off war with them, and Hitler's going to see that too. We'll talk about that in future videos. Now that's what's going on in the Soviet Union. What's going on in the United States? Well, we don't we don't kind of move towards a strongman and towards a dictatorship. We actually elect this guy right here, as I said earlier. That's Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He comes to power in the United States, and while all these dramatic changes are going on around the world, the Americans largely want to stay uninvolved. They try to avoid much of the problems. They want to return to that isolationism that they had pre-World War I. Remember, I said they kind of just want to stay out of the way, let Europe destroy itself if it wants to. They're not going to get involved. Now, to keep the United States out of future wars, Congress is going to pass what's known as the Neutrality Acts. There's two of them, one in 1935 and another in 1937, and that bans the sale of weapons to countries at war. Remember, too, one important fact. The United States at this time is not part of the League of Nations, which is another reason why it's so weak. And you have this very fervent, very strident, keep us out of war, keep us neutral. We don't want to get in Europe's problems. Political movement that's going on in the United States at this time, and it's going to make it really difficult for FDR when he does become president. For how is he going to be able to help his allies, people like France and Germany, or France and Great Britain, I'm sorry, when they need it most, yet still stay neutral? And a lot of historians have believed that he knew good and well we were going to eventually be wrapped up in this war. So he's slowly and quietly going to be, grinding the gears of war to get us ready for that, so that we are not so far behind like we were in World War I. So that's it for today. Make sure you have all of this information in your notes. If you have any questions, please come see me. Other than that, have a great rest of your day.